Hi, everyone. How are you? Welcome to our morning session. So honored to have you here. We have so many brilliant minds from across the country. This session, as you folks know, is called Lessons Learned, addressing women and gender diverse people's experiences of homelessness, violence, or sex work through intuitive program design. And I had the pleasure of looking at each of these applications, and you're just very much in for a treat in brilliance and a lot for us to learn together today. I want to start by honoring the land that we are on. We acknowledge the land we're meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that the City of Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So let me share with you a bit of what we're going to be hearing today. So these three presentations are about building programming through research, meaningful input, and outreach. The first presentation by Street Level Women at Risk representatives includes a founding member of the Women's Advisory Group. Will share a new program model that was developed to document the SLWAR's experience and lessons through implementing a successful Housing First program for individuals who identify as women engaged in survival sex. The second presentation is from the Greater Victoria Coalition to End Homelessness. By honoring and centering the voices of women with lived experiences of homelessness and violence, they listened, learned, co-developed, and prototyped 5 new solutions that address health, well-being, and housing challenges. And our third presentation is from the Maple, a place-based supportive housing program for women. They will share their journey through the developmental evaluation, what they learned, and what they had to unlearn based on feedback from residents with lived expertise. And to start, we're going to start with our colleagues at Street. Oh, hold on a second. Here we go. We're going to start with Street Level Women at Risk collaborative program model. Street Level Women at Risk representatives include a founding member of the Women's Advisory Group. We'll share a new program model that was developed to document their experiences and lessons from implementing a successful Housing First program for individuals who identify as women engaged in survival sex work. Attendees of this session will leave with inspiration and valuable tools to create positive change in their communities for this target population. So I'll welcome them to this stage. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for the intro. Everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. Okay, so my name's Jacqueline. I'm the manager of this program. Beside me is our wonderful new team lead, Kelly, who's presenting with me today. And then we're really, really grateful to have our wonderful Women's Advisory Group members here. One is a founding member, and they both continue to advise us on our work today. And so really excited that we're going to hear from both of them. So we're going to try and get our part over as quickly as possible so that we can all listen to Melissa and Tracy. So our hope today, next slide, please. Thank you. Our hope today is that you can learn a little bit about our program. We really wanted to share our journey with you. We've just launched our website and our new program model, which we're really excited about. Our hope is that in sharing our Street Level Women at Risk story from London, that it'll inspire communities like yours to go back home and hopefully want to implement a similar program that works for your community to support these amazing women. Next slide, please. So we'll begin with who we are. This is our community guide that really guides our work, and it began in 2014 with a really extensive consultation process with, we had a consultant come in, we had the backbone support of our City of London. Some of the folks are in the crowd today. We had 33 women with lived experience and 22 agencies that consulted on this model. There were several processes that took place, lots of conversations that happened around things like philosophical differences, language, how we were going to support these women in our community that we were all supporting but knew we weren't doing it well enough, and we really needed to change outcomes for the women that were experiencing chronic homelessness and engaging in street-involved sex work that was survival-based. So we came together, we created this plan. Again, that's continued to guide our work today. Through the consultation process, we began implementing our program in 2016 with the hiring of staff. And again, our Women's Advisory Group, which are the 33 women with lived experience that helped to create this plan in London, continue to advise the work as we proceed with the implementation. So this is our conceptual model. You'll see many things if you decide to take a look through our guide, which is found on our website. And really our plan is at the center of our model is the participant, is the women that we're serving, living safely in her home with the right supports that are surrounding her. So we currently have, when we created the plan in 2014, there were 22 agencies at the table. We currently have 27, and we're working as a housing first collaborative model. So the purpose of this model is that we are removing barriers to services and making it easier for women to participate in their community through community integration, well-being, of course, from the place of housing stability, and removing those barriers to services. It is women-led and goal-led so that it can all be based on the goals and dreams that she has for herself. Next slide, please. Thanks.
So this slide here kind of identifies how our program works and how the referral process kind of works to get into our program. So we can receive referrals through coordinated access through the City of London, which will kind of stream through Jacqueline and then come to myself. We also work with a sergeant through London Police Services. They have a Persons at Risk program, which has approximately 150 women identified on it. So that's also a streamline into our program. But I would say mainly our referrals come through outreach. So that's when myself and our Persons at Risk sergeant, we go out and meet women where they are at. This part is really important to build trusting relationships with the women. And then from there, we can also connect with women while they're in jails or institutions so that we can help them with their housing as they are released. So once they are connected with us and we're kind of going through the referral process, we will match them with our housing finder, which is where she figures out their housing needs. And then from there, she will go on a housing search for them. And then once that is all set up, we kind of create a move plan, and then we will match them with their housing stability worker. And once they are housed, they're working with their housing stability worker on the challenges that could have potentially led to their homelessness in the first place and any self-identified goals that they have. And then from there, the hope is that this will eventually lead to community belonging. So this is kind of what to expect. So I worked as a housing stability worker for 3 years before getting team lead, so I've seen this firsthand. So typically when the women come in, there is a big sense of instability in their lives, and they are in survival mode. So when they are first housed, it's really important to learn about their boundaries, and this is the most important time for them to engage with their housing stability worker. This relationship with their housing stability worker is very key. And then typically what we'll see is kind of a plateau or a baseline, what we call, and someone's baseline looks very different for each individual, so your version of success in their housing stability could look very different for each person. And then as time goes on, we adjust goals based on their choice and what they would like to work on, and then eventually seeing the SPDAT scores decrease. And then what we have seen as time passes on is there's community reintegration, they're connecting with families again, there's an increase in health outcomes, and there's a decrease in survival sex work as it becomes more of a choice at this point. And then I would say key points to remember is that it's very much a marathon and not a sprint. That, you know, housing stability can take a year, it can take 5, it can take 10. And it's just really important to walk alongside them during this journey, and it's led by them. So, yeah.
So there may be questions about why we also use a sergeant when we're talking about women engaged in survival sex work, and that's a great question. So in London, we had one sergeant that was already connecting with women that were engaged in street-involved sex work that was street-based. And this sergeant was really passionate about providing support, rebuilding trust to these systems that may not have been trustworthy to them in the past, and helping to build a bridge to safety. However, she was finding that there wasn't the supports available in London for these individuals when she was connecting with them on the street. And so it was like, how do we bring our community together to wrap around these participants that were not traditionally a part of the system? These women were not always known to services, although we might have been supporting some of the women. A lot of them were not connected to supports. They were working out on the street, and we might have seen them coming through the institutional circuit, which was the circuit we were trying to break in London. So the Persons at Risk program is how SLOAR was really founded, but of course we are connected to our coordinated access system and all of the 27 agencies that are now a part of this work. So if you take a look at our website, excuse me, which we will include at the end of the presentation, you will see things like our years 1 to 3 evaluation, which really shows that this was a successful housing collaborative model. And again, we were really grateful to our city that they did invest in that initial fund to evaluate the model to see how successful we were. We were finding that women were finding housing of choice, locating safe and affordable housing options with our housing finder, and then of course helping to reach some of their goals with the support of a housing stability worker that was journeying alongside them. All of those year 1 to 3 evaluations are found on our website, and we would really encourage you to go and take a look at those, read through all of the outcomes that are provided there, to see if there's anything that could really fit for your community as well. On the website, you will also find our program guide. This was a lot of heartfelt work that took place with our women's advisory group, with the participants in the program, with our staff team, with a consultant, with the City of London, and our collaborative partners. And on that guide, we did a documentation review. We did 15 facilitated discussions with the groups I just mentioned, and a review and a revision process. Our hope, again, is that if there is a community that's inspired to create a 27-agency Housing First collaborative model for women in your community, that we're making this as seamless as possible through the sharing of our story and all of our lessons learned. So in that program guide, it's quite extensive. So we have our introduction. You'll find who we are and the history of our process, our approach, our operational structure. You'll find program resources and operations. You'll find the human resource information. You'll find our evaluations and, again, our lessons learned. And again, as I had mentioned, this was a significant amount of work that went into this guide in hopes to just try and make the process as easy as possible, in the hope that you may want to start a new chapter in your community. At the end of the presentation, we'll include our website, which again has all the information, and our contact information should you wish to get in touch with us to ask any more questions. So again, I think I've said this, but within our first 3 years, we were really grateful that our city invested into the evaluation of this, because again, what I'm hoping you'll find on that website through our outcomes is that women were not only able to achieve housing stability, but our work is women-led, and they were really able to build autonomy, excuse me, in their lives, and really work on the goals that they had for themselves and focus on community well-being and belonging, which they so deserve. We asked women what they needed, and we were available there to provide it. So we're also grateful to our community that they were willing to take this investment into the participants that we are so privileged to know and work alongside. Thank you. We're going to welcome Tracy and Mel now.
I'm so nervous. So being here yesterday and getting back to the hotel, I had realized that I really needed to decompress the day and the triggers that had happened for me during the day. So I just wanted to let people know that I only have my story to share. And I just wanted to warn that, it may be triggering, talk of abuse and a history of drug use. So hi everyone, I'm Tracy, and I would like to start off by saying I'm grateful to be here with you all this morning. So grateful. I'm so grateful to be standing here and not out there. doing every single thing I said I would never do. As my addiction grew, so did the line I was never going to cross. I really wonder how I made it out alive. There were so many times that I reached out for help, so many times I longed to be free from the grip of addiction that held me. I can remember my last admittance to detox. The staff had me sitting and doing the intake as she counted 54 admissions and wondered out loud how many more it would take. That stay was used as a place to sleep most times. My drug-induced psychosis, so many times. Sometimes those trips landed an opportunity for treatment, 4 of them to be exact. I would always have great hopes and dreams entering these facilities. I could get off the street. I could get my kids back. My family would want something to do with me. Maybe I could even become employable one day, self-supporting, free. I dreamed of my very own bed with fresh, clean sheets and a time where I wouldn't have to use scratchy gas station brown paper towels to wash myself. I used napkins from Tim Hortons to use the washroom. I would get clean for periods of time only to get in my own way and use again, starting the spiral. I ended up leaving a treatment center in 2006 to start a relationship I had found. His aunt put us up. We found jobs in a place pretty quick, but one day I said something he didn't like. I was beaten to an unrecognizable state, and my world was ripped out from underneath me again. I went back to the town I was from, and I just used. I used until I couldn't use no more. I decided to relocate. There was just something about being in the town that I was from. I just couldn't stay clean there. I knew too many people, and the temptations were just too great for me. Because of the assault, I was able to relocate to Women's Community House in London, where I put my name on both the housing list and a treatment center, and made a promise to myself that whatever came available first, I would do. For me, it was London housing. So being new to London, I didn't know anyone. My family didn't want anything to do with me. I felt really alone. I didn't have my children. I felt discarded and of no value. Everywhere I had reached out to before had this rule that you had to be clean and abstinent to receive any sort of help. I could stop using. I just couldn't stay stopped. I met a woman in the shelter who was attending Narcotics Anonymous meetings, and this is where my life truly began. I began to heal physically from the assault, and over time, with a lot of looking at myself, I started to heal mentally, emotionally, and most importantly, spiritually. My family started to come back into my life. Over the years of recovery, I've managed to build a beautiful life. I'm so grateful for my life today. I really feel like I have more than I have ever dreamed. I've been able to stay clean, build a business where I'm valued and trusted, be a loving, caring, supportive mother and wife, provide for my family, and even have my very own bed with clean sheets. It's funny how things work in recovery. Sometimes I just shake my head at how situations unfold. It truly is amazing. Service is a big part of my recovery. After, there's a saying, do H&I and you won't get high. I spent so many years getting myself straight that I felt within that I needed more, that I could do more, that I could give what was freely given to me, to feel purposeful. I started bringing meetings into detox and eventually into the EMDC. And a few years after that, I was introduced to street-level women at risk. From a woman who was in the jail, I brought a meeting into and was clean and giving back herself. Since sitting at that women's advisory group table, I can really see that all that I have had to go through has been not in vain. That finally there's a place that I can put all those painful times and empty existences to use for the better, to know that there was a Lorna Bruce, a Sergeant Amy Birch, and now a Sergeant Luann Devine, who pounds the pavement to offer street-level women a chance at a new way to live. To know that there was a team of support for these women. To know that these women qualify for help just because they are women and they need a home is absolutely amazing to me. I love that the participants are met where they are at and given a non-judgmental support, kindness, and a helping hand with each goal they set out for themselves. You know, I really like that they don't have somebody telling them what their agenda is. You know, I really like that, they don't have to be clean to receive some part of kindness and respect and help. I often leave a WAG meeting wondering what my journey could have looked like had street-level women at risk been available to me. The answer to that doesn't really seem to matter as much as the fact that it's here now. And not only is it working, it can also work for you in your town and in your city. And that's it.
Thank you, Tracy. That was amazing. Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa, and I am a proud member of the Women's Advisory Group, a very nervous member of the Women's Advisory Group. I'm going to just get right to it because I don't have a lot of time here. But I want you to know that one of the only reasons that I'm alive and well here today, being able to talk to you, is because of this amazing woman, Tracy, that we just were honored with hearing her story. This woman came into my life some 12 years ago into an institution, bringing a 12-step meeting into me, and she spoke her truth. And she spoke a truth that I needed to hear at the time, and quite frankly, spoke a line to me that spoke to my heart, and she told me that she only sucked dick today when she wanted to suck dick. And as a gay woman who had been caught up in drug addiction and survival sex work for the last 8 years, I really needed to hear that. And I'm happy to report for the last 12 years, I have not seen any penises in my life. And I'm not happy to report that because I think penises are bad. I'm happy to report that because that's a choice that I have in my life today, a freedom of choice. So I mention that because that identification piece was so important to me, right? It was the thing that gave me hope that maybe my life could be better. And I believe that our program, that identification, tapping into lived experience, is one of the main components as to why this program is working, right? And given, like Tracy just mentioned, giving these women in the program options in their life, autonomy in their life, right? Like our amazing presenters just presented, You know, the program manual, you guys are very lucky because all the hard work has already been done for you. You're really just being given an Easter egg here. This amazing staff that makes this program up, and you know, the Women's Advisory Group is pretty cool too, I must say. But we've been working at this for years and kind of worked all the tweaks out, right? And I know there's still some tweaks to work out for sure, but the program manual lays it all out. It's a beautiful blueprint for you guys. Also, our evaluation was mentioned. You can't argue with the numbers, man. Like you just can't argue with statistics, right? And it's proof that this is working. It's working in women's lives. It's saving women's lives. So there's the number, there's the numbers, there's the program manual, but also I want to speak to, because after sitting on the Women's Advisory Group for some years now, I have some personal experience, some personal stories as more proof that this is working. And these stories have kind of happened by accident because the staff is very vigilant on keeping confidentiality at the forefront, right? Unless these women choose to let us know that they're in the program. So there's been many friends that I've had in the program that I didn't know have been in the program, and I'm working in the program, and I think it's very cool. I think it's very important. So these stories have happened by accident. The first story, and I would only know her as DD for many years, right? Because they use initials that mean nothing to me. And this woman, you need to know that this was one of the hardest, scariest women I've ever met, okay? She had been in the game for many, many years. She hated police. She came from a time when serving and protecting looked a little different, when there wasn't as much compassion and open-mindedness to, you know, drug addiction and sex work and all of that stuff. She hated the police. She was very, very hard. She had lived out there for many, many years. I was connected to her when she ended up in the hospital. She was given a diagnosis that she was living in full-blown AIDS. Her T-cell count was like 7, which is very, very bad. And she was given the diagnosis by a doctor who walked in and gave her a pamphlet and told her, "Don't worry, it's not a death sentence today," and walked out. She was not very supported in her life. No home, no shelter, no family, not a lot of friends. And this woman was introduced to Swalar, where she met a cop that wasn't so bad, and she endorsed that cop and said, "Yeah, I think she's okay," you know, and let her help. She let the police help her for the first time. She was introduced to Swalar and got housing, and then was given a bunch of support that no matter how hard she tried to push them away, they would be there for her the next time. This woman today, I don't get to hear a lot from her, right? Because she's just kind of doing her own thing, living her life, has housing. And I got a message from her a couple months ago via a mutual friend that she's doing well. Her T-cell count is up. She's in good health. And she wanted me to know that she has a little Pomeranian dog and that she dresses up. Right? So that's pretty cool. Another story really quickly, another story. This woman, I would learn that she was DB. And this happened by accident too, because she wanted to be one of the first, and may she be resting in the sweetest peace. She wanted to be one of the first participants in the program to graduate the program and join the Women's Advisory Group, right? And a policy that we created in the Women's Advisory Group is not an interview, but you meet a member of the Women's Advisory Group as an introduction, right, to welcome them. So I get an email and saying that we have this participant, but it's time sensitive because she had been given some medical news that wasn't that good and she didn't have a lot of time to live, right? So I'm like, okay, and I meet via Zoom with this woman, and there she is, right? This woman that I had spent many years on the streets with, shared many cells with, and there she is, a participant in the program for close to a year. And she wants to be on the Women's Advisory Group. So, and she did. And anyway, we got to connect and spend some one-on-one time. And it was very important to me because I get good news via the women's advisory group meetings, right? But there was something different about hearing it straight from a participant's mouth and heart. And so we sat there, and she was on her deathbed. She was living in a hospice type setting, and we talked about war stories, right? We talked about war stories from back in the day, and we talked about a man who was sentenced to 12 years for murdering one of our colleagues, right? A woman that we used to work together with, and how we were connected to this man, but we had made it out, and he didn't get us, and look at us now. And then she talked about her experience with the Solar program. She talked about how she was a favorite of the housing finder, Darlene's, and that Darlene would move mountains for her, right? She talked that she had been rehoused based on her choice many times because if the setting wasn't good for her. And she talked about her grandchildren, and she talked about her stuff. She talked about her housing stability worker that would bring her chocolate at her request. And it was really important for me to hear that from her, to see this woman that I had spent many, many days, many months, many years in that terrible life, and to see where she was at now because of the program. So again, my job here today was to get you guys to go to the website, to go to check out our program manual because it's working, and there's no excuses not to bring this back to your community because it's working, and our friends are dying out there because this program doesn't exist. And the speaker today, I was like, holy shit, it's pretty simple. The solution to homelessness is housing. It's pretty simple. And really, really quick, because I want to point out, I had a couple of miscellaneous notes. I think it's amazing that some of our former women's advisory group members are now out in the community working for all these agencies doing amazing things, okay? So that's one perk of being on the women's advisory group. Two, it's a perfect opportunity to turn our pain to purpose. In such a miserable part of my life, I get to bring just a little bit of positivity to it, right? And also, you guys need to know that we are treated very well as a women's advisory group member. Like, our time is reimbursed. They feed us. They're so compassionate and considerate to vicarious trauma, or, are we comfortable? We were set up well today as to coming and speaking and to be informed that it's going to be on Zoom, and we are treated very, very well. And they're going to have to kick me out of this advisory. It means so much, and the relationships I've built, and it all started with a woman coming into an institution, speaking her truth, and something that I can identify with. So anyway, I'm really grateful to be given this opportunity to speak, and I'm begging you guys, please, if you build it, they will come. Field of Dreams, right? So please go and bring this back to your community because it's working. So thank you.
Wow. That was incredibly powerful. Can we do one more round of applause for Melissa and Tracy in particular? It's my pleasure to introduce our next presentation from our friends at the Greater Victoria Coalition to End Homelessness. They'll introduce themselves, but I'll just tell you a bit about what we're going to be hearing about. This is called Surfacing Our Strengths, Developing Prototypes to Address Health, Well-Being, and Housing Challenges for Women Plus. Through the National Housing Strategy Solutions Lab, focusing on solutions to complex housing problems, the Surfacing Our Strengths Solutions Lab was born. The honoring and centering of voices of women plus with lived experiences of homelessness and violence. We listened, learned, co-developed, and prototyped 5 new solutions that address health, well-being, and housing challenges. This presentation will focus on the 5 prototypes developed from peer navigation support to addictions to coordinated access and assessment, and our progress in piloting these prototypes. So I'll welcome my colleagues to the stage.
Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Janine Theobald. I'm the Director of Collaborative Engagement at the Greater Victoria Coalition to End Homelessness. And I'm grateful to be joining you here today. I was born in the treaty lands and territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit people, unbeknownst to me being brought up on the doctrine of discovery. Joining you today from the homelands of the Lekwungen people, known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. So very grateful for that. More so, equally so, incredibly grateful for the presentation that we just experienced. I'm in awe and gratitude. And I'm feeling like some of the prototypes that we're about to share with you are actually, we've just been given the next step for some of the pieces we've discovered. So I'm really grateful for that. So thank you. Next slide, please. So a startling and brutal statistic, every 6 days, a woman in Canada is killed by her intimate partner. And I think we could also acknowledge that many of those women are further marginalized by Indigenous identity, gender identity, and their experiences of homelessness. Next slide, please. And we do acknowledge that violence does play a pivotal role in the experiences of homelessness, particularly for Women Plus who identify as Indigenous. Our partners in this lab, the Aboriginal Coalition to End Homelessness, had done much engagement with Indigenous street community, and 100% of the women in their women's circles had experiences ongoingly and historical of gender-based violence. And we do find that in the sector, the homelessness serving sector, the shelter sector, and the response of women's transition sheltering are very often working in silos, and that was one of the impetus for this project. Was how do we ensure that everybody who is in need of these supports is having them, and we're doing that in a culture of scarcity as well, where we're all struggling to meet the needs and also continue with our funding and move forward. So we do note that many women are underserved as a result of those challenges. Next slide, please. A little bit of background. The next slide. This is extra. Bring some sunshine into the space. So similar to our colleagues from London, our Solutions Lab wanted to focus and acknowledge that honoring and centering the voices of Women Plus with lived and living experiences of homelessness and violence in order to listen, to learn, to co-develop, and implement new solutions that address interconnected health, because as we know, houselessness is also healthlessness, in creating new solutions. And some of those solutions are solutions that we all know, they're very basic. I think many of us are experts in the room. It's just a matter of continuing to develop that breadth of wisdom, experience, and data to further, hopefully, move the dial on the challenge. Next slide, please. For the purpose of our Solutions Lab, we did need to identify a definition for Women Plus. So for the purpose of the lab, it was all women, including people with diverse gender identities. However, that was static in our end report, but this is a fluid definition moving forward. Will continue to evolve. Next slide, please. So the challenge, part of the phases of the lab, was defining the challenge itself, because we have to look at what it is that we're trying to achieve collective impact on resolving by bringing groups together. So the challenge, and I will just do some reading today, is how might we co-develop equitable, safe, and culturally supportive responses to the housing needs of Women Plus who have been or are at risk of experiencing violence and homelessness in Greater Victoria. And acknowledging that culturally supportive has a broad definition as well, both for Indigenous culture and identity, but also for women who use substances or have other experiences. And the other challenge is how might we co-develop solutions in a way that protects the dignity and cultural identity of Women Plus. Next slide, please. So today we're going to share the prototypes that we worked together to develop, and that had been done in collaboration with Women Plus with lived and living experiences, both with our peer research team, some of our staff members. I also am a person with lived experience. Next slide, please. So you'll see here just some logos. To the left there, the lab backbone team, so the hosts and partners of the lab, or ourselves, the Greater Victoria Coalition to End Homelessness, which I do take the time to say because we also have an Aboriginal Coalition to End Homelessness, and there's times where people say the coalition, and I say, no, you have to say the whole thing. We cannot invisibilize the work of our Indigenous partners. And Shift Collaborative, who who are consultants who work with the CMHC to, and maybe some folks are familiar with the process in regard to shepherding us through and developing the lab. This group of service providers, Intercultural Association, we've got some government representation, Indigenous and other groups, evolved out of, after the 2018 conference in Hamilton. We reconvened a group of women serving organizations to look at how we could come together and do some work to work on the challenge that we've identified here. So they were, many of those, this lab application evolved out of that group and identified needs from the community. And of course funded by the National Housing Strategy and the CMHC, so thanks for the money. So these core group worked with us through the duration of the 18-month lab. Next slide, please. And I do want to, although the peer research team was included in our leadership team, I do want to identify them as incredible folks. And Hillary, some of you might know, she's often represented. I can see her head nodding there. Caitlin is part of the group. Yes, thank you. And our other team members, Melissa, Melinda, and Mandy. Hillary fit right in, even though she doesn't start with an M there. But these women were part of our leadership team, were part of the process of developing the whole lab, and also named the lab as well. So next slide, please. So by design, the Solutions Lab you are required to go through these five phases of the lab, and we will be focusing on stage 4 today when I turn the mic over to my colleague Michelle. But really, I want to note that we wrote this application in 2019 and received notification and funding in early 2020. And a huge part of this project really was about engaging with women and their experiences, and doing so in a way that felt safe. And it takes time to make the relationships to do that. So although we were able to achieve a lot of the work that we wanted to do, we still were not able to reach as many women with lived and living experience by virtue of the pandemic. We did create some structures and opportunities to do so, and also our coalition, our very small staffed coalition, was also very involved in the pandemic response in our communities, which is another workshop for another session. But moving through, we identified the scope of the challenge that we wanted to address, continued to do consultation in community through discovering what was happening, and I'm so excited to learn about your project. I can't believe we didn't find it in our research, but we have it today. And then continue to develop through the various meetings that we were working on, moved to our prototype stage, and then developed a roadmap. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Michelle.
Okay. It's so hard to follow so many brave and fierce women. And to place myself in context, I have been very fortunate to have privilege just by the fact of being stupid. I didn't know that I couldn't do things. I didn't know that I didn't expect to be emotional. I didn't know that having a father that only had a 12th grade education and a mother that went to stenography school with a 10th grade education didn't mean that I couldn't become a doctor of philosophy at the University of Denver. So I am just grateful for all of the privilege that I have been able to find because people didn't say no. So to all you fierce women and all you fierce people who hear no all the time, keep going, because we all can lift each other up and move forward together. So thank you for indulging me for a couple of seconds. And I will get on to my dweeby part of my dweeby self of being the Director of Research and Data Analysis with the Greater Victoria Coalition to End Homelessness, because yes, stats do help. So next slide, please. We have developed 5 prototypes that have the potential to support Women Plus fleeing violence and at risk of homelessness. Each of the following graphics describes Women Plus's journey. You can find our handout in our app that provides more information on each of the prototypes. Next slide, please. Our Systems and Safety Peer Navigators prototype is a specific community role or team developed with Women Plus and gender diverse folks with lived experiences who will be trained to support the Women Plus at risk or fleeing from violence to navigate and leverage the resources within the system that exists today. The role of the support, the SOSPN, is to support Women Plus and gender diverse people to access emergency supports, shelter, safety, services, and resources, and to identify gaps in services to fill where they can. To do so, they utilize a decolonized, trauma-informed, and brain injury-informed approach to not only be a resource to those seeking support, but to walk alongside them as they navigate available supports and services. Behind the scenes, the SOSPN role is also engaged in connecting with organizations to pre-navigate the system, support inter-organizational cooperation, and uncover better ways to build intersecting infrastructure. Next slide, please. We also looked at the prioritization of Women Plus in the Coordinated Access and Assessment System as it works today in the province of British Columbia, particularly in the Greater Victoria region. The prototype team began with the identification of a gap in our process. Additional priority has not been given to Women Plus experiencing violence. Thus, there were issues for these women to access existing supportive housing in the CAA process. Existing supportive and transitional housing facilities are often inappropriate, unsafe, and even traumatic for Women Plus. So the team focused on creating better data collection, a survey to reflect the Women Plus's needs for housing, something that is currently lacking in research and therefore implementation. While the system is not yet available to provide more appropriate housing, it is hoped that this data will support the creation of a safer and more suitable housing in the future. The goal of this prototype is to create more robust data to better understand the experiences, preferences, and needs of homeless Women Plus experiencing violence. Ultimately, it is hoped this information will be used to develop safe housing and supports for Women Plus who aren't accepted or turned away from women's transition houses. So to those people that say that all we need to know for emergency shelters is inflow and outflow, I say no. We need to know who is in the inflow, and we need to know how they get out. We cannot just say, let's count numbers. Let's be bean counters. Next slide, please. The housing supply through shared accommodation team, we're looking to tackle a large problem. There is not enough housing stock for Women Plus at risk of violence and homelessness in Victoria. There's not even enough housing supply for my family in Victoria. Okay, sorry, lost my place. With such a sizable challenge to start with, the team looked to come up with a model in which both the housing providers and housing seekers would feel safe and comfortable. They realized that to produce a workable prototype, the best approach was to focus on a more targeted solution that would impact at least a portion of the target population. Recognizing the existing backlog in the city's transitional housing programs, they sought to find an accessible solution for those moving from second and third stage housing. Through research, the team discovered an existing housing website in BC. It's called HappyPad. It's a social purpose venture that matches prospective tenants and homeowners who wish to rent out space in their homes. We are hoping that we will be able to work in partnership with HappyPad, women's support and women's support organizations to provide safer and more sustainable gateway to shared accommodation through assessments and screenings of both parties before move-in, thus lowering risk and increasing chances of a successful outcome. Well, the team has yet to reach out to HappyPad, as they have not had the opportunity for further conversations to discuss the interest or feasibility. We're currently engaging with transitional housing organizations to gauge interest and feasibility of the HappyPad app. Now, to give you a little background, some very, very innovative University of British Columbia in Kelowna, BCO, Okanagan campus, looked at students who had no housing, who were living in cars, and potential housing, and developed a way to make it safe for both parties. We're hoping to leverage that. And right now, we're in a really good space to be able to complete at least one prototype. So next slide, please. The Women's Plus Coalition or Council began as an idea to create a safe space in which to uplift Women Plus to use their voices to become active players in the decisions and services that are made for them. This coalition circle or council is envisioned to be a culturally supportive and safe place, working to empower and strengthen those experiencing homelessness and violence, bringing to light and linking together the wisdom holders to guide those currently experiencing homelessness and violence, much like our colleagues here. Decision makers will consult with this circle of wisdom holders regarding services being developed and decisions being made for this population. We will work together. Next slide, please. When thinking about person-based supports, education and advocacy for women plus at risk or fleeing violence, the arts-based storytelling prototype heard a consistent desire to share stories. The arts-based storytelling prototype aims to create a safe and inclusive space where Women Plus would be able to gather, either individually or in groups, to work through their trauma by expressing their feelings and their stories through mixed media visual arts. Arts-based storytelling would be facilitated by trained art therapists with sessions developed to empower Women Plus to own their stories and to give these Women Plus the strength to break the myths and shames of domestic violence. When we look at this prototype display, we see Sonia at the start of her journey, or their journey, in a dark space. As they move through their journey, they open themselves up and eventually the door for others. Next slide, please. And I hand it back to Janine. I get to sit and relax. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Michelle. So as we were going through the process to derive these 5 prototypes, there was so much to do and so much to be done. And so one thing I didn't mention, but I'll mention now, is that of our peer research team, each one of them was a co-lead on each of the prototype teams and walked that journey through, conception of the idea to, well, we didn't implement the prototypes, but we implement prototyping. So really looking, we've kind of broken into the 3 categories around navigation and system supports, engagement and data for housing policy and plans within our Women Coalition, and prioritization through CAA, and then trying to address the housing supply. So each of these key impact areas were where we collectively decided with and as well as the leadership team, we engaged with focus groups, with intergovernmental groups, and really looking to see where we could achieve the impact. And recognizing that we were doing that again while everybody was in COVID response. I was really grateful that people were able to come into the space, even if it was through virtually, to be able to identify where we could have that key impact on this challenge. It's still a challenge, though. It's, we can pull these meetings together, we can pull these groups together, but everybody is still so heads down, whether it's through scarcity of funding, through the, I don't know if anybody experiencing staffing shortages in your world. We've kind of been, and particularly in the not-for-profit sector, and my executive director says we should be the for-impact sector, because we're continually building projects. We don't want to say no, because there is the need, and we will do it because we care, and we keep saying yes. And the sides of our desks, all of a sudden, here's my desk. The side of my desk is all of these tables in front of me trying to pull these pieces together. And I think that happens in all sectors at this time in particular. So really looking to coordinate our efforts. Next slide, please. Oh, this is over to you, Michelle.
Is it?
Yep.
Oh, darn. I forgot that I had something else. Okay.
No rest.
No rest for the weary. As part of our efforts, pardon me, I am so short. As part of our efforts, we've been able to work with students from the University of Victoria to develop online navigator resources. Next slide, please. In the fall of 2021, 2 students in the community-based participatory research course at the University of Victoria, and I will name them, Rachel Dufort and Frances Lando, started to map resources for women plus fleeing violence and worked on an initial mapping diagram. And you know what's really amazing to me? Every single diagram that I have seen that has anything to do with people experiencing homelessness, or particularly women, the person or the safety is in the center of that diagram. And we're out of time? Okay. Okay, thank you. So they started to map our resources through this project. Frances and Rachel and their instructor, Dr. Crystal Tremblay and Ken Josephson, met to discuss the next steps, and we're looking for ways to collaborate with the computing science department at the University of Victoria. Through a set of happy circumstances, Crystal forwarded an invitation for community members to participate in something called the Inspire program, connecting community partners to garage apprentices. Next slide, please. So, guess what? We got a computer design team. Our garage apprentice team, Ahmed, Mobina, Bachan, Parker, and Peyton are an amazing group of computer science students with a passion for supporting service sector and nonprofit organizations as university undergraduate students. Next slide, please. So we created a series of requests for the Garage Apprentice team prior to participating in a May 2nd this year Inspire program launch. These included the creation of a single platform where Women Plus can learn about and access all services in the Greater Victoria region that would be useful, that a single platform would be designed to be useful to organizations and frontline workers, particularly our SOS Peer Navigator, to support these women, and that the application would provide sources of basic services and specific resources. Next slide, please. So we've already got what's called a minimal viable prototype. For all of you non-computer people, it's an MVP, and it's not a most valuable player, although I think it is. And we're testing this prototype out with potential users. The team has been meeting with mentors from the Software and Computing Center, including IBM, believe it or not, as well as frontline workers and support workers, and some people with lived experience of gender-based violence and homelessness to review the prototype. So we're using this information to make adjustments to our prototype. And at the end, in the not too distant future, we should have something that we will be able to host on our website. It will probably look something very similar to iDetermine, which is in Toronto, which I really love, and I stole the idea from. So, Janine.
Okay. maybe I was a little lost on that other slide, but I think I pulled it off. If we could go to the next slide, please. And basically what's next, we'll jump to the next slide. Thanks so much. Had the privilege in June of speaking to the Select Standing Committee of Finance and Government Services in the province of British Columbia, and was able to bring forward this work that we've done together in community and the need for ongoing support. As I mentioned earlier, and money. So that's the first recommendation. We need outcomes-based multi-year funding for agencies working on solutions. We also need those for backbone organizations that are supporting the coordination of these efforts. We can't keep doing project funding year to year. It takes so much time and effort, and it ends up harming the people that we're trying to support, particularly when we're unable to continue with the programs. And then again, 3-year funding. I was going to ask for 5, but 3 years is a good start. And I think, I sorry I had to ask your name again, but Melissa and Tracy, their story of that peer navigation, that connection. The app is amazing, but ultimately it's going to be about that person-to-person connection. We saw that demonstrated in the intersectionalities of the different prototypes that we presented, where there's opportunity for those pieces to come together. As well, we do endeavor to continue to do our work with our Women Identified Peer Research Team and our Lived Experience Council and other engagement work that we do. However, we do not have the funding nor the capacity to really support a Women's Lived Experience Council the way it needs to be and should be. And again, I love the graphic with the Women Plus at the center of the circle. And that circle is both looked at development of programs, but also by all levels of government and funders and service delivery creators to say these women are the ones who are going to let us know if this is going to work. They will co-design, and we'll know our job is done when they say that they feel safe and that they feel at home, whatever that looks like for different people. Next slide, please. And we're really excited. Anybody going to be in the Victoria area November 15th? Over there, Nikki, represent. I would love to have you at our Pathways to Action event, where we're going to go beyond sharing the prototypes, and we're really going to engage all levels of government, funders, women with lived and living experiences, other service providers, to be able to make a commitment on how we are actually going to be able to continue to move forward and support these ideas and recognize that the women in our community, the Women Plus, are not being served in the way they need to, and they continue to struggle, they continue to die, and that's not okay on our watch. So thank you all for your time.
And just our website. Oh, yes. There are stories on that website now from a UVic student who has been working with older women who have experienced homelessness and fled violence. So please visit our website. We've redesigned it.
Thank you so much, Janine and Michelle. I would encourage everyone to come and connect with Janine and Michelle and our other colleagues up here if you are hearing innovations you want to implement in your community. These folks can help you. So our last presentation today, I'm going to invite my colleagues from the Trellis Society up. We're going to hear about the Maples Learning Journey. The Maple, a place-based supportive housing program for women, participated in a 12-month developmental evaluation with the support of learning and evaluation partners. This presentation will share our journey through the developmental evaluation, what we learned and what we had to unlearn based on feedback from residents with lived expertise. This presentation will highlight focus areas of our program design that included reconciliation, Indigenous worldviews and cultural connections, natural support networks, reflective practice, developmental supports, health coordination, and trauma-informed environments. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much to the presenters who came before us. That was incredibly powerful and wonderful, and it is an honor to work in this sector with all of you. My name is Victoria Maldonado. I am the Strategic Lead for Impact and Evaluation, so I'm the bean counter, the human bean counter. This is Crystal Scott, the manager of the Maple. Before we get started, I just want to, next slide. I just want to do a brief land acknowledgement. We're so grateful to be here on this land. to be sustained by the water and the animals and the plants here, and we are honored and grateful to visit the territory of the many nations who have stewarded this land since time immemorial, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and the many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who dwell here now. We gratefully acknowledge that we are treaty people on Treaty 13 land and bound to uphold our treaty responsibilities. Just to give a little bit of organizational context, Trellis is a large service organization. We provide a really broad range and continuum of services, operating off of kind of three major practice models, which we'll cover in a little bit more detail later. The Maple itself, next slide, is a 25-unit place-based supportive housing building supporting female-identified people, typically who have chronic homelessness, typically who live with a lot of addiction, or have lived in the past with a lot of addiction. It is a harm reduction building, and our goal, although our model is permanent supportive housing because there's no end date, people can live at the Maple for as long as they need and want to, is to support women in their goals. So if they have a goal to move into another community or to move into less supportive or less intensive supports, we are there to support them with that. Next slide. So Trellis as an organization is relatively new, but it formed from the merger of two other service organizations in Calgary. I also just want to say that Trellis is situated in Mohkinstsis, which is the traditional territory of the Blackfoot people, including the Siksika, Kainai, North and South Piikani nations. It's on Treaty 7 territory, shared with the Iahe Nakota, including the Chiniki, Wesley, and Bearspaw First Nations, and the Tsuut'ina Nation, as well as the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. This is really important because of who lives at the Maple. We spent a lot of this first year really planning and thinking about how we wanted to approach this. We had just merged, we were figuring out our common values and how that was going to look in practice. And the Maple was the first kind of new program for our organization, or one of them. We did take over operations of the Maple. So it was a building, it was full, it had residents, it had staff. We took over operations in the fall and spent that first few months really spending our time getting to know the residents, talking to the staff who were there, doing those initial interviews, and implementing some of those first policy changes. Next slide. After that, sorry folks. After that, we moved into our funder proposed an evaluation that would be a partnership between themselves, Calgary Homeless Foundation, an evaluation team from Alberta Health Services, and ourselves, as well as 6 other organizations operating kind of new programs trying to be innovative in our city. So to do that, the evaluators worked with us in great detail to really clarify what is our purpose, what are we trying to do here, what is our theory of change, all of those kind of like good high-level things. But of course, what we wanted to know is what do the residents think? Like, what do we need to be doing here? When we try to kind of put our top-down theory out there into the world, how does that land and what do people actually need? Next slide, please. So the 6 key learning areas were gone over in our in our beautiful introduction, so thank you, I won't rehash that, but I do want to emphasize that reconciliation is such a core one for us because so many reasons. When we took over the building, 85% of residents identified as Indigenous, and we know that Indigenous homelessness doesn't exist without colonization. So for us to engage with that and do whatever we could to be culturally safe was absolutely a top priority. Next. So 2 of our organization's major practice models really impact all 6 learning areas, but most specifically, or kind of most pointedly, reconciliation and culture and the trauma-informed environment, because we are truly committed to anti-oppressive practice and trauma-informed care. So we knew that we would have some challenges at the outset in terms of power sharing. When you operate a building, you have a degree of power that the residents don't have. So figuring out how we were going to operationalize that power sharing was really important to us. And trauma-informed care, although it's incredibly simple and basic, is also sometimes really hard to implement in practice. So we did identify some initial challenges there. From here, I'm going to throw it over to Crystal because she has all the good stuff.
Awesome, thank you. I'm so grateful for Victoria because data is not my strong suit. I love the people. Next slide, please. So as Victoria mentioned, that when we first took over, we really worked with the staff and the residents to see what the needs were. So you'll see throughout the slides that there's some quotes from the residents and the staff, and I'm not going to read them just for time's sake. So next slide. So as Victoria mentioned, the reconciliation and the culture piece is really, really big to us. So I'm going to kind of go through some of the successes we've seen, as well as being place-based. We know that with any new program, there's going to be some challenges. So some of the successes that we've really seen is that the residents that live in our building have called this their home. So this is really important to them. So we want it to be peer-led. So they've really taken their own initiative to lead a lot of the cultural pieces, things like smudging, cooking, crafting. Will often, they'll bring me their ideas in written form of things they want to implement. And really, to me, I'm open to anything as long as they're willing to be a part of that. And so it's really, really awesome. We also have circle keepers throughout our organization, so a wealth of knowledge that they come to share. We are barrier-free participation, so just come as you choose. So here's just some more resident quotes, some things that they wanted. This was, you'll see throughout this that we have some quotes from the beginning, and then we have some other quotes as time goes on. So these are just some things that they really wanted to see. So our lovely data analysis person pulled some numbers for us. So over the last year, we have an increase of 84 stability or improvement with our cultural belonging in our domain. So we use the quality of life matrix, and every 3 months we go through an evaluation process with that. And then we had 39, and this is kind of some of the challenge when we talk about cultural pieces, is that potentially how staff and an organization sees cultural pieces may be different than that of the residents. So I think this is a learning or development area for us where we can really increase that we're all on the same page about this. So 39% of the residents reported that the Maple helped them connect to their culture. Next slide. Some more quotes. Next slide. So as Victoria mentioned, we are a trauma-informed agency, so safety was number one for us. And being in a place-based building, this can present some challenges as well as it can have some perks. So we are a secured building, so we do buzz in and out. The clients often mentioned that this was a really big safety feature for them because they always knew who was coming in. They knew that the staff were there to greet whoever was coming through the door. Also, our staff are supported in therapeutic crisis intervention training, so a big piece of our agency. We also wanted to really implement the ability to cope, empower, and sense of self-control. So this is that piece of letting it be client-led. We're empowering them to make their own choices. And then connection. I think connection, and I love this picture because it really speaks to our common areas and how we really want to connect as a community within our building. Next slide, please. So this is just a really big success for us. Throughout this journey, we were also given some extra funding to do what we call a community extension pilot project. And we got that money on July 1st, and we've currently moved 2 of our residents out into the community, into scattered site housing. How that looks is that they're still really a part of our program. We still do case management, but what we've recognized is that place-based is not for everybody. And so there is really no barriers to that. If they identify, we want to really help them to get there. Next slide. So Victoria mentioned that another key component for us is reflective practice. And when we talk about reflective practice, this isn't just for staff, this is for the residents as well. So we are data-driven. We're committed to continuous growth. So as I talked about, we're reaching out all the time, learning new initiatives. And our practice intentions are to create space and take a step back from crisis and reflect. So when we have a crisis, it's a learning opportunity, and then we really spend the time with both residents and staff to debrief those situations and reflect of how we can move forward. And the anticipated challenges with our reflective practice is that we're on unpredictable environments, finding consistent time, as one of our other colleagues that presented, staffing sometimes can be a bit of a challenge, finding staff. And then just finding the time as a group to reflect can be really challenging. Next slide. Move to the next one as well. So some successes that we've really had over the last few years is that we really implemented a really strong staffing model, and so we have case managers as well as we have frontline client support, and we really have aligned both of those together. So at any time there's somebody available for the residents to help them kind of as, you know, if it's day, night, there's people there to work through those challenges. We have a really strong clinical team within our agency, so we're able to have some therapeutic debriefing. And then, as Victoria mentioned, we work really closely with our learning and evaluation partners to give us feedback as well. Some of the challenges around reflective practice, again, is just the communication across shifts. It's a 24/7 run program. We're not always there at the same times. So really try and find ways to communicate with one another. Future strategies that we're hoping is continuing to leverage our clinical support team. And with a large agency, we have a lot of options to us, and so really leveraging our other programs to support us with those staffing challenges and to come in and give us those opportunities to team build and grow. So our natural supports is really big to us. So the family and natural support framework that we use at Trellis, we believe that connection is a basic human need. And that the lack of connection has a negative health effect. So one of the challenges I think over the last few years is that we were in the middle of COVID. So navigating those common spaces and those pieces was difficult at times. So some of the challenges around that too is that there is sometimes tension when you work in a place-based building with 25 different residents. We are getting referrals from chronic homelessness. So a lot of the residents that come in together have lived together on the streets, have the same guests, the same kind of connections, and sometimes there's some tension between that. So we really work with the residents to talk about how do we work through those things. And then sometimes it's really difficult to assess and restore the natural support. So we're very open. We have community dinners and brunch, and we really invite their guests and their natural supports to come. Some of the feedback we got around that when we first took over is that children should be permitted at all times, and we agreed. So that's something that we've really worked through around safety and those pieces to allow them to have their children come whenever that can be possible to happen. So this kind of speaks to that they're not guests, they're their children. So next slide. So some successes, like I said, we right away evaluated that guest policy because we recognize how that natural support connection is so vital. We have a lot of opportunities for the residents to engage. We implemented a rec program since we took over, and it was highly successful, doing a lot of activities within the community. We have dinners, brunches, weekly activities. One of the barriers that I wanted to break down is that often there's this distinguishing factor between staff and residents. And so we have moved kind of our staff office into the communal areas so that we're just part of their home. We are involved in baking and cooking and doing all of those things. And sometimes some of the challenges with natural supports, as I kind of mentioned, is that we do need to maintain some guidelines around guests and the behavior and the expectations. We found that treating the guests the same way that we treat the residents has opened up a whole level of respect, where if there is some kind of conflict, it's not like they can never come back, but maybe it's that we can open up those conversations around safety with them as well. And we found great success around that. Next slide. Again, just some more quotes. Next slide. So changes this year, we have seen an 81% stable or improved in their support networks, and the residents themselves have reported that the Maple has helped them stay connected to important people in their life. 61% of them have reported that. So, next slide. So developmental supports. So reduction in differential between staff positions. And so I kind of mentioned about this already, that we have case managers and client support. And so we really wanted those relationships to be that they could go to anybody at any time. So the other piece for us is around the harm reduction piece. So we've really educated our team about what harm reduction is. And often we think, one of the questions I always ask at an interview is what harm reduction means to somebody, as well as to give us examples, because harm reduction means so many things. And then we sometimes have the challenge where some residents come and they would prefer to just not engage, just kind of be on their own, and that's okay too. And we found that some of our residents that we have moved already into the community, that is their success, is to be within the community rather than in a place-based building. Next slide, please. So just some more numbers. Changes this year. So we saw an 88% stable or improved for self-care and daily living. 78% of the residents report that the Maple is helping them take better care of themselves. And 83% of the residents report that because of the Maple, they can keep themselves safe when using drugs or alcohol. Next slide. You can move to the next slide as well, please. Awesome. So one of the big things for us is healthcare coordination, because as we always know, there's some systematic barriers. So we've worked really closely with the Alberta Health Services, our Calgary Police Service, our crisis response team, as well as our PACT team, so police and crisis team. And we found that this has really improved our EMS calls, our CPS calls, and those service providers. So these are the changes over 1 year for us. We have seen a 55% drop in EMS access over the last year, 52% drop in ER visits, and a 39% drop in police interactions. So what's next for us? So we want to continue to work with our learning partners to clarify our approach and focus on our learning. We want to continue with cultural programming. I think we can always be better. And continue to investigate what is home for the people that we provide space for. For the future, we're going to continue with our reflective practice, growing staff capacity, and continue to listen to what the residents' needs are. Just another. Awesome. That is it for us.
Thank you both so much. We are short on time for questions, and I know they're out there in the room, so let's try to do this kind of as quickly as we can. Who has a burning question for any of the presentations? Oh, yes. Yep.
I think from the very start, we really put it on the table that basically the only real difference was that the case managers would go maybe assist in appointments out in the community, but that everybody had the same skill set to provide the same supports. And we do talk a lot about it in staff meetings. We really, with the reflective practice, are open to feedback to one another as well. And we just really found that it's created this team environment so that everyone recognizes that everybody is brought to the table with the same strengths and responsibilities. Thank you. Yeah, for sure.
Thanks so much. Questions?
I have a question.
Great.
Sorry. Are there any real questions?
Any other questions in the room? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we have had some of those experiences for sure. And when we talked about guest kind of policies around that, there has been, unfortunately, had to be some limitation with that. But also, I think that this is everybody's journey. And so there are some cases where some of our residents still are, those are their natural supports. And so we really focus on the conversations about creating healthy boundaries, creating those situations. And what we've really found is that when we talk about harm reduction, that's a piece of it for us. And so if they're inviting a natural support in that potentially there is that chance of domestic violence, creating this environment where they can ask us for those safety checks in the same way they could if they're using a substance. And we found that that has really eliminated some of that. It's just that safety that they know that we're there to help guide that and not judge, not tell them they can't have those people, those kind of pieces.
Great. Yeah. Hi.
With regards to harm reduction within the context of substance use, I was wondering about that. Like, is there a space that you have, common space, but a space that residents can access outside of their apartments, units, that they can use? Or with regards to the safety planning, is that just, of course, it's individual, but yeah, I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit more.
For sure. It's definitely individual. And so the way that our place-based building is set up is that they all have their individual units. So we do ask that they don't utilize they don't use in the common spaces, just because everybody is an individual, and for some that is triggering. We've actually had some of our residents who are working or living in sobriety at the moment, and that are, working towards treatment and those kind of pieces. And so with that, I think that we've just created this environment that they can come to us for supplies, and we offer those safety checks. There's been times where they've asked staff to sit with them in those situations, and so we do create that non-judgmental environment that they have. We have the openness for them to be allowed to
Sorry,
do
I
that.
guess I wasn't clear. I was wondering, and you did answer the question, but whether there was a designated space for safe consumption where people
Yeah,
could
no.
socialize, but-
No. Yeah, for sure.
We have time for one more question. Great.
I actually just wanted to really amplify the street level women at risk collaborative and their package. I've had the chance to work through it, and it is so accessible, so inspiring, and really is a great way to learn from another example. Not necessarily just for street level women at risk, but all sorts of groups trying to coordinate access, trying to bring different groups to the table. That can't recommend it.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing. And in the discussion tab on this session, we're going to drop in links to all of the program models and materials and websites for everyone here. But thank you so much for joining us. This was so exciting. Congratulations to all of you folks for your innovation and solidarity in your work. Thank you.